San Francisco and the LA Rams are set to face off Week 2 of the 2023 NFL season. San Francisco in this game will wear their red home jerseys, and this means LA chose to wear their away jerseys. And frankly, you can't blame them because last year, San Francisco fans overran LA Stadium. Regardless of uniform color or what psychological impact that may have on 49ers players or even Rams players, in this video, I hope to dive a little bit deeper into this matchup and say how I think this game will play out. To begin our analysis, we need to understand what a Kyle Shanahan team versus Sean McVay team usually looks like. Kyle Shanahan loves to bring physicality, where Sean McVay is often a more finesse type team. But this doesn't mean he also can't bring the physicality. There are 4 areas in which I think this game will be defined. 1, the matchup between the Niners run attack and the Rams run defense. The second area is the Niners defense versus the Rams aerial attack, most notably led by Matthew Stafford's return. Third area is the Niners defensive line versus the offensive line for the Rams, and then vice versa, the Niners offensive line, most notably Colton McKivitz versus the Rams defensive line. So without further ado, let's jump into the Niners run attack led by Christian McCaffrey versus the Rams rush defense, which allowed an abysmal 5.3 yards per carry to Kenneth Walker. One of the biggest failings for the Seattle Seahawks in their Week 1 matchup against the LA Rams wasn't going back to Kenneth Walker or really their running game in general. They only ran the ball 18 times. In comparison, the Niners seem dedicated already to run it down people's throats, running it 32 times in their matchup against the Steelers. And the starter here, Christian McCaffrey, ran it 22 times, 152 yards, 6.9 yards per carry, and a touchdown. Ultimately, the Niners were able to open up lanes against a dominant Pittsburgh defense, at least during the preseason. So for these reasons, I do think the Niners will target the LA Rams rush defense and see if they can hold up against a high-powered rush attack. And if they can just keep it on the floor, you can see Kyle Shanahan's perfectly okay with that and will easily run it 30-35 times a game. So now let's talk about what the LA Rams love to do on their offensive side of the ball, which really leads me to their point 2. That's passing. But before we get there, they also run it a ton. In their game against the Seattle Seahawks, they actually ran it more than San Francisco, totaling 40 carries. But they weren't nearly as efficient, not even achieving 100 yards on the ground, but they did have 3 touchdowns. But this is where the story really turns to Matthew Stafford. I would say he's the real key to this offense. Against the Seattle Seahawks, Matthew Stafford went 334 yards through the air, 8.8 yards per attempt, with a rating of 91.3. This was all without Cooper Kupp. And while he won't have Cooper Kupp in the Week 2 matchup either, he does have guys like Atwell. On only 6 receptions, Tutu Atwell was able to amass 119 yards. Puka Nacua also amassed 119 yards on 10 receptions. Tyler Higbee looked like a security blanket for Matthew Stafford throughout the game. I would say this is really where the LA Rams are most dangerous. While the Rams' passing attack does look deadly to start the season, the San Francisco 49ers don't have slouches on their pass defense either. And one of their most notable additions this offseason was Steve Wilks, the defensive coordinator who was brought in to focus on the secondary. And well, he kind of did, because during their matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 1, we saw Ambry Thomas start the game. And while we saw rotations on the cornerback position, we did see the Niners handle Kenny Pickett, and they handled him pretty easily. They went to the air 46 times, but the Niners didn't even give up 250 yards and came away with 2 interceptions. Lenore led the group here in tackles, but Charvarius Ward and Talanoa Hufanga were the ones to come up with the INTs. While linebackers traditionally aren't talked about in the passing game because they're seen as a liability, for San Francisco, they're actually an asset. For instance, Fred Warner was the one to tip the pass to Talanoa Hufanga, leading to that interception. Earlier in the game, he also almost had another interception. But even Dre Greenlaw is more than adequate in coverage. And while he did have that touchdown scored on him, it was great coverage on the play. So while overall the Niners performed well against the passing attack from the Pittsburgh Steelers, that is a completely different offense than the LA Rams. One led by Kenny Pickett and the other led by Matthew Stafford, a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And well, I would imagine the Rams and Sean McVay will be looking at that matchup and trying to target the Niners passing defense. And they might even have a slight advantage in this category. This does lead me to my third point, which is also closely tied to the passing game, and that's the Niners defensive line versus the Rams offensive line. In their week 1 matchup, in 38 pass attempts, the Rams offensive line didn't give up a single sack. I don't think this trend is going to continue though against the Niners defensive line. They had 5 sacks with a quarterback pressure rate of 45.1% and had a total of 9 quarterback hits. Matthew Stafford is going to be under pressure all day, and this incidentally is when he performs the worst. Right now, as an opposing coach looking at the Niners defensive line, it appears to be a schematical nightmare. Sure, you can go ahead and try to double team Bosa or maybe Hargrave, but that leaves Eric Armstead or Drake Jackson, who got 3 sacks in the week 1 matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers one-on-one. And that's going to lead to your quarterback getting a hit a lot. Ask Kenny Pickett. Or you could even ask Geno Smith, which leads me to my fourth point. The Niners offensive line versus the Rams defensive line. In their week 1 matchup, the Rams had a pressure rate of 32.1%. And they were able to get to Geno Smith for 2 sacks and 7 quarterback hits. One key player to watch on San Francisco's offensive line is Colton McKivitz. He gave up 3 sacks in his week 1 debut to TJ Watt. In this week, he should face Michael Hoyt. He did record half a sack, but he isn't any TJ Watt. Nonetheless, this will be a good test for Colt McKivitz. According to Chris Forrester, who's the Niners offensive line coach, this is often one of the most important things for an offensive lineman, how they come back after their beat. Is Colton McKivitz going to come back and fight it out and really not continue to get beat like he did against TJ Watt, or will he crumble under the pressure? I'm interested to see this from Colton McKivitz. If I was to bet, I would say he has a rebound game and doesn't give up as many sacks, but we will see. Now moving on the interior part of the Niners offensive line, the matchup to watch here is Aaron Donald versus whoever. It's either going to be a Burford or Brendel or Banks. While the Niners don't have Brunskill, who was able to basically neutralize Aaron Donald somehow each time they faced him, they do have an extremely strong running attack. And if you're able to establish this early on, it really neutralizes Aaron Donald as a pass rusher and kind of makes him less effective as a player. And this has to be the Niners' plan going into this game. Even though Brock Purdy had an extremely strong game week 1, he only threw the ball 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. While many people will gawk at that and say, you can't win with that. Kyle Shanahan's offense is meant to win with that. And that's why you saw the San Francisco 49ers really steamroll the Pittsburgh Steelers 30-7. Their physicality and the way they play ball, I think, matches up perfectly with the LA Rams, and you can see that in their record. And in this game, I think that will continue to carry out with the Niners winning 30-14. So now that I gave my thoughts on key battles to watch, as well as my score prediction, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below and what you think the score will be this game. It would also mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed. And as always, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.